Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show which discusses any and all topics under the sun from a woman's point of view. Hosted by Dr. Susan Strauss.
And welcome to It's a Woman's World. I'm Susan Strauss, and I'd like to introduce you to the panel that's going to carry us along for the next half hour. We have Uma Junga.
Hi, Susan.
Uma, glad you're here. We've missed seeing you the last couple of times.
I know, but I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you are. We have Bonnie Watkins, who very often is behind the scenes because she works the cameras, but today she's gracing us with her presence.
Thank you.
Glad you're here, Bonnie. And we have Nadia Jordana. Nadia also is very often behind the scenes. Nadia, we're glad that you're here.
It's fun to be here.
We're glad to have you, and we're glad to have you on this side. And we have Anu Maprala. Anu, we're glad you're here.
Glad to be here.
And Anu is actually Uma's daughter. So we've got a little mother-daughter piece going today. And we're going to be talking about a subject that has gained a fair amount of notoriety in the press lately, domestic violence. And it's one of those topics that, you hate to really talk about, but it needs to be talked about. It needs to have a voice. It needs for people to give recognition to it. And if you've watched the news or if you've read the newspaper, you know that Ray Rice with the Baltimore Ravens has been videoed hitting his fiancée at the time with such force that it knocked her out. She is now his wife, but that has been something that we've seen. In addition to having Adrian Peterson being brought in for child abuse charges. And you might be saying, but wait a minute, isn't child abuse a little bit different than other forms of domestic violence? Well, we're going to talk about that. And let's talk, first of all, by giving a definition of what do we really mean by domestic violence. And for the purposes of today, what we're going to be referring to with domestic violence is going to be a rather broad umbrella, where when we think about domestic violence, we're going to be thinking about it in terms of violence towards women, violence towards children, and yes, even violence towards men when you're in an intimate relationship. Sometimes that's even broader than just living together, but we will be addressing those various factions as we look at this very real problem in the United States. So Bonnie, let's start with you. And what would you have us think about domestic violence and the work that you do with women and women's rights and women's economics here in Minnesota?
Thank you. Well, in my personal opinion, there's two issues that override all others for the women's movement in the kind of public policy sense, or I often talk about making women's dreams come true. Mm-hmm. There are some other ones I think are really important, but the two that I am so focused on these days are the violence issue. The other, by the way, is pay equity, that if women had economic power, that would help with some of the other issues too. But for today, I think what is so striking about domestic violence, that, it's in the paper every day. It's only now with the famous football players that it's gotten the huge influx of attention.
Yes.
But I have sometimes gotten to the point I can't even read that page of the newspaper and they're so creative about it. These guys light their wives on fire and, just do incredible things. And it's not, as we continue to talk about it, I think a couple things. One, it is not an individual problem. It's not because you weren't a good enough wife or you didn't cook a good enough dinner or because the child was naughty, and it's not something that happens in one little house on your street. It's happening in a lot of houses, up and down the street and on college campuses and when you're dating in high school. So it's a huge public health problem. Really on a par with an epidemic of colds and flu and viruses. It seems like it's catching. And secondly, although we're so aware of the kind of cultural ramifications that it plays out differently in a lot of the different cultures we have in this country, it crosses every culture too. There is no safe culture.
No.
There is no economic level, no skin color, no religion where a woman is safe, where a child is safe, because it is just something that we all unfortunately accept as normal to some degree.
Well, and I think it's good that you bring up the whole point about it not being economically based. We know that there's physicians, we know that there's lawyers, we know that there are CEOs that conduct themselves this way, as well as people that might be lower on the socioeconomic scale. But can you say anything about what the economic stance of a woman, what role that might play in whether or not she stays with her significant other.
I think that must play a big role, because if she feels like she doesn't have the money to
Yes.
leave, if she doesn't have the resources to leave, the
Yes.
first thing you're going to think of is, where will I go?
Yeah.
What will I do? How will I manage? If there are
Definitely.
children,
Oh, yes.
that's 10 times worse, because you're focused on, the woman's focused on taking care of those children. How will I manage that? And it really, not many women, or not all of those women, have family resources that are going to be just right there in a heartbeat. So
That's
I'm
right.
sure economics plays a big role.
Well, and I think too, Nadia, you and I had talked a little bit earlier about how one of your friends had said she had hurt herself by falling down. So when we talk about what kind of support services, not services so much, but in terms of family members and friends, very often women don't want to acknowledge that they've been victimized by their significant other, and they lie.
Yes, and you know, that was in the 1970s. It was my first experience, and I was so surprised and so shocked to see this friend all banged up, and we'd gone over there for dinner to visit, and she had a black eye. It just didn't look good, and as my husband and I were leaving that evening, he said, "Isn't that too bad what happened to so-and-so?" And I said, "I don't think it's what she said. I think her husband hurt her." And he says, "I can't believe he would do anything like that." And I said, "It just doesn't seem right." And this was my very first experience with this, and I didn't know what to say or do. I didn't say anything to her about it for many months later, when it became more and more obvious, and then we started talking. But people in those days especially didn't know
Yes.
what to say or do.
Yes, and back then too, it was sort of thought of, well, that's behind closed doors.
Oh, yeah.
That's a family issue.
Between
Definitely.
them,
Even
yeah.
back in India, I had one of my friend's friend who had been battered too like that. You know, she herself caught herself in fire. You know, it looks like her husband did that, and she couldn't even tell that. You know, nobody knew that till like many months after that incident happened. She was like into herself because of the mainly of the culture too. You know
Yes.
what always moms tell in Indian culture is like, you know, try to compromise as much as you can. You know, don't tell your personal things, share your personal problems with
Don't make
anybody
waves.
else. Yes, don't make any statements. Try to be as calm as, you know, try to
Yes.
suppress your feelings
Yes.
as much as you can. So that poor girl was like, you know, it looks like he was beating her like every day, and nobody even couldn't come up and say she has been suffering like this. And she herself didn't even come in front and say, "This is the problem I'm facing, please help me out." No, because she had 2 kids she had to take care of.
Sure.
Yeah.
And she had to suffer in
Yes,
silence,
in
essentially,
silence.
with no
She was like
support.
suffering, anything, and then one day it looks like, you know, I don't know.
What is
She was on
it?
fire one day.
Afraid of making it worse.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. And what you said about, you know, what your mother told you is it's not just, it's probably more towards the woman, right? And
Yes,
it goes back
yes.
to that idea of
Yes.
that primitive instinct of,
Yes.
you know, establishing superiority. So
Yes.
a lot of
Yes,
that has to do
control.
with
Oh my
that male
God, we need-
instinct of having control.
That's
so a
true.
lot of it, like, you know, Bonnie mentioned, it's not that no culture is more prone for a woman to be safer or a child to be safer, because in the end, it's men and females.
Always.
You know, men, no matter what culture, no matter what background, have that instinct of superiority. And, you know, no matter how much we try to, you know, equal movements, rights,
Oh,
whatever it is,
we fight a
it's
lot, but
always
still.
been established that that men are supposed to be superior in some ways, you know.
And to follow up on the economics, if I could,
Yes.
the issue that, you know, it's not just, I don't have enough money to leave right now. And I hope we'll talk later about, I think there's less focus these days on the woman should leave. You know, some people are going, wait, why doesn't he leave? You know what I
Yes,
mean?
that's
But
right. I know, but
Whatever.
it always
But
is.
also, it really is a self-esteem issue. In a way, I hate to say it because it sounds so touchy-feely, but I think because women continue to earn less than men, we have, you know, over a lifetime, little girls in, you know, 1st grade
Yes.
have a million messages that they are lesser than.
That's right.
And
It
whether that's
starts
about
early.
less money or smaller, although they're not smaller in first grade maybe, but just that sense of less confidence, less potential, less important.
That's right.
The wife is supposed to submit to her husband, even if we don't say that in the marriage vows anymore. In American mainstream culture, that's still out there.
Still there.
Well, and let's look at some other cultures. I think, Anu, you had said that it really doesn't matter what the culture is. And Bonnie has created a video in an interview with some women. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Bonnie? And we'll look at that video.
Sure, and I hope to post more of it later. It's on YouTube, but I had the wonderful opportunity to interview 3 women of color who are working on prevention of violence, but with organizations that are very familiar with how this plays out in Minnesota.
Okay, let's take a look at the video.
This is an excerpt from Unfinished Business, The Future of the American Women's Movement. The excerpt is about ending violence against women. I interviewed 3 women leaders, Kaoli Vang Her, the director of Nu Cha, Hmong Women Achieving Together, Sasha Cotton of the Institute for Domestic Violence in the African American Community, and Guadalupe Lopez of the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition.
Problem is when we see things happen, domestic violence within minority communities, that it's almost the communities themselves are singled out as if this is just an issue within our own communities. And I feel like when domestic violence happens in the broader community, in the white community, that we don't, it's not framed in the same way. There's so much work that could be done together, even though we are very diverse. And I know you had mentioned that it would be really great if there was the ability to be able to find common themes that we can all work towards together and make it a movement of all
The
people.
message still needs to be that violence is unacceptable, regardless of, like our affiliation to culture or race. So I think trying to find those things that connect us and is an important element, right? Remembering that at the end of the day, it really is about getting at the heart of violence prevention and that we all want to be safe.
We really believe that change happens within our families and our clans. And so our goal with the Family Dialogues is to bring families together, talk about gender issues. I think that we can all be from the same family, and yet, one of our participants, a brother and a sister came together, and the brother walked away saying that I didn't realize all of the things that you were challenged with being in this family. We can be in the same family and see the family so very differently.
And then how do we talk about whole families? I think that dynamic has gotten lost in the conversation, and for communities, in particular communities of color, trying to figure out what women's needs are and what they really want, and that sometimes that challenges the systems we have created, that it may not be an escape route, it may be help planning how to stay in the relationship and be safe. So how do we talk about what are all the options for women?
It's about the tribal communities is that we know exactly when that oppression and that violence started for us in a different manner, and we can actually pinpoint that time for us. And so how do we reclaim that, where women were held sacred and men and women had their roles in certain, and violence was not accepted in our communities. You were born into this society where things were so muddled with violence and acceptance of it, and trying to wake people up and your relatives up to say, it's time to wake up, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. Make space for healing, make space for change, make space for accountability. And I think that if we look back at some of the ways that prevention how it's been done in the past, it's like, oh, teach the girls how to be safe, teach the girls what not to do, teach the girls. It's not working. What the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition is trying to do is, what are we going to have our men do? Not every man is out there raping,
Right.
but they have to start holding each other in their own gender accountable for these assaults. And so what does that look like? So it's having that dialogue with both genders and all youth, elders, and all ages.
Within the historical Black colleges, and this idea of making sure that young men understand what consent is, right? And I think that that's important across college campuses everywhere, because I don't think that we spend a lot of time talking to our sons about don't be a rapist, don't be a batterer, right? We spend a lot of time talking to our daughters about don't be a victim, button your blouse up, don't walk by yourself in the dark, don't have too many drinks at a party, but we don't talk to our boys about don't take advantage of a girl if she's passed out, or if she says no, it doesn't mean keep asking, it means don't ask anymore and respect the boundary. These are messages that we think, of course, they should just know that, but they don't. So how do we get them to a place where they understand healthy relationships? And I think that that's the focus of prevention, is really teaching people how to interact in a healthy way.
Some of the best conversations and some of the best strategic planning around that kitchen table that you were talking about, and that's how this movement started.
Now we have Hmong men standing up saying, we have to stop this. We have all this privilege and we have the power to do something. And we truly believe that it is because somebody was having these dialogues with these young men when they were young so that they could grow up to have a different lens.
And in each community, there's always one really great organizer. How do we find those true leaders that are already born in our community and enhance that? And so we have multiple leaders in every little, in every neighborhood, in every tribe, in every reservation, and everywhere. Because everybody has a gift, and that's how we're going to do it, is if we enhance our gifts and recognize the gifts we bring that we are born with and bring it to the table to help end it, to recognize that and putting everybody's, gifts in place.
Great.
We've been really trying to use technology as a means because our community is structured differently. We're far more spread out. Some of our cultural lens because of slavery, and then we have new incoming African immigrants, Afro-Latinos, Afro-Caribbeans. So trying to figure out the diversity and complexity that exists in our own community. So social media and the internet is one of the venues that we've been trying to utilize, as well as African American churches and mosques. And so we've been convening these African American Domestic Peace Project participants and filming video blogs that are going to be loaded to our website.
Let's continue the conversation about ending all forms of violence against women. What do you think? Do you talk about this with your family?
Ooh, that's pretty inspiring stuff, Bonnie. I think you really captured some great information on what these women are doing. Can you kind of summarize some of that for us?
I will do my best.
Thank you.
There's so much to say on this topic. We could go on for days. But I think I mentioned before that the Hmong women have created this family dialogue project, which I think is so cool, that Cowley referred to in the video, so that women can go home and talk to their families, and brothers can talk to sisters, to just get at that very basic level about this before something happens. The African American women are creating weblogs where you can go home and make a little video with your family and upload it, or a video. That's a nationwide project, so what are people doing in various parts of the country that people can go and see? It's called the African American Domestic Peace Project, which is also a good, put the positive spin on it. Let's go for domestic peace. And the Native American women in Minnesota on reservations are talking about building new kinds of leadership. Everybody's a leader. Not everybody is the person who can go up to the legislature and testify. Not everybody is the one who can write a book about it. But all of us can talk to our friends and neighbors and our elected officials at the city level.
Which we need to be doing.
Yeah, so that's what was inspiring to me. And they're kind of, they're beautiful, to me young. They're probably 40-something, I don't know. But,
That's pretty young.
to me they're on the cutting edge. Instead of saying, let's build more shelters so women have a place to go, they're going, wait. Maybe women need some other options besimes leaving. And maybe we need to prevent it before it happens.
That's right. Uma, when you saw that, what might you think about that in terms of India? Do you think that there's any messages that you would be able to transpose to any of your friends and family in India on some of these things?
I would definitely say they should also follow this method, I think so. Because, in India, typically they don't talk about in open about these kind of things.
Yeah.
That's the really big mistake that they do. They always hide it and they keep it to themselves. I think it's definitely a very excellent practice that they can put that into practice in there too, so that I think it will prevent them from this happening. In India it happens a lot. Domestic violence is a lot out there. Yes.
One of the things I was going to ask you, Anu, was you're in high school,
Yes.
And so I'm just curious. Are you aware of some of this dating violence, which I'm going to put under the umbrella of domestic violence? Are you aware? Do you hear any of your classmates talking about it?
And now I was going to bring up, like, when Bonnie was talking about technology and the use of that, now in this day and age, technology is becoming a vice for people to show violence, because verbal violence is a huge part of this.
Yes, it is.
And a huge part of dating violence. Now with Twitter is a big issue right now, because it's a hotspot. All the teens, they're always commenting whatever they see. There's been so many issues about, teenagers talking about teachers or whatnot, but this dating too, over Twitter, over Facebook, these comments over photos, over
firestorm.
Yes, and it's not just girls turning on girlfriends. It's guys about their own girlfriends being like, oh yeah, what is this, or like commenting like such derogatory things, and then to see some of these girls like still, you know, just make an excuse, oh, my boyfriend's just being cute about it or being nice about it.
Yes,
That's not
excusing them.
true.
That's Yeah.
You know, it's that show of superiority again. He wants to seem like, and especially in high school when hierarchies are such
Oh,
an
yes.
important thing to them.
I agree with you, and we see that in terms of the cyberbullying, cyber
Yes.
sexting. You know, Nadia, now that's sort of your billy whack too, maybe with us old people. You're the social media guru. What might you offer around domestic violence and social media? Not so much from the kids' perspective, but are you privy to any of that in the work that you do?
I have a sense for some of that, especially what she was saying about the like I said, the word firestorm
Yes.
that happens online through social media. There's a certain sense of, this is the feeling that I get, there's a certain sense of arm's lengthedness where it's not face-to-face, it's not one-to-one like domestic violence within the home, which has a lot more to do with, I think, power and superiority and all of the other issues. But this thing that happens on social media is, it's almost like you're causing a fight with a person or picking or bullying on someone, and it's not face-to-face.
Yeah, so it's easier.
It's easier, and it's more cowardly in an awful lot
I
of
agree
ways.
with you.
Some people don't even know who is doing that.
Yes.
Have you
yes.
observed that? That is
Yes.
even much more.
And things are so
Scary.
much more social now
Yes.
that nobody has any secrets.
Exactly.
And, so and that makes
Yeah.
it just as easy to spread a rumor or spread
Yeah.
a lie.
Even in Facebook, have you seen, they were just even before going to the shopping, they put everything in the Facebook that I'm going to do this, do this. Why do you want to talk about that on Facebook?
Facebook.
Use this for important things, you know?
Someone else might use it for ammunition.
One of the things I wanted to share too is that I've been a battered wife, if you want to use that phrase, way back in my young years. And when I think back to it now, you know, you always wonder, well, why do people stay? But you know, you still love them. It's not like the first time they strike out at you that, well, that's it, I'm going to leave. I had just one child at the time. Maybe I'd had two, I don't remember. But you still love them. And in my case, the first time it happened, you get into a denial. Well, it was just one of those things.
A one-time
It was a
thing.
one-time thing, and I think the next time it happened, it had been well over a year. And so you
And
think,
did you get a big apology and flowers? And
no, I
Oh,
did
really?
not. He did not fit that typical, you strike out and then it's, oh, I'm so sorry. That never happened.
okay.
I never did. I don't know if I ever got an apology. I
And
might
it was
have.
a year before it happened again.
Yes, and if I did, I certainly wasn't with flowers and chocolates, I'll tell you that. So I have other friends who were abused, and they really went through hell with marital rape and everything else. And mine wasn't, quote, that bad, if you might want to say. It was spread out over quite a period of time. What brought me to the point of finally getting the divorce is that one time when he had hit me, my daughters now were a little bit older, and my older daughter made a comment about, Daddy, what are you doing? And he picked her
So
up.
they saw it.
They saw it and threw her on her bed. She had a canopy bed, and some of the rungs from the canopy fell on her. Now, that was not his intent, obviously, but I thought, that's it, I'm leaving. So all of a sudden, it was more important that my children were taken care of than that I was taken care of. And the other thing that happened is one time when he had my hair like this and was pulling, and, ooh, that hurts, I turned around to protect myself, and I scratched his cheek and left marks. And of course, he then had to go to work the next day. So then I felt guilty, even though I protected myself. But I tell you, he never did it again. And of course, then we went through a divorce. But it's hard to leave when you still love somebody, and in my case, everything was spread out. Now, I could have taken care of myself economically. I was a professional. I had a good job. But there's so many things psychologically that get involved, and they don't start out being an abuser. You know, we had a nice little family relationship. So it is
It's
difficult.
complicated.
It is
Assume
very
they don't
complicated.
even intend to be, unless I get that wrong. I don't know.
I don't know either. It just happened which I remember it happened that first time.
Well, thank you so much for telling your story. It's still kind of hard to talk about, isn't
Yeah,
it? And we need that. We
it
need people to
is.
say,
It
you know, we
is.
haven't talked very much about the child abuse and the, you know, some people go, it's just spanking, it's just a whooping. It's just, where do you draw the line?
Yes.
But it's a similar thing. It's so painful, it's so personal, it's a guilty secret. Is it okay or not okay?
That's right.
And the elders, there's
Oh,
talk
yes,
about
that's
elder
right,
abuse.
elder
and
abuse.
We don't hear very much about that, but it's becoming more of an issue as people are taking care of their elder parents at home. That seems to be a trend back towards that, which is a wonderful trend, but it doesn't always work
Dangerous,
for
yeah.
some.
Well, and I think when you talk about the child abuse piece, there's the very overt stuff, what Adrian Peterson did to his son. But then there's where you're kind of a secondary victim when I think about my daughters and having observed what their father did to me. And, they're in their 40s now, but what's the impact of their observation as children? And my one daughter talks about the helplessness that she felt in being able to take care of me and then wondering, is he going to do that to me too? So there's that piece of it. And I think with the Adrian Peterson piece, too, when you think about, they're talking about, well, it's the culture and it's his religion and that's the way he was treated. And so how much of it is a learned behavior?
Yes.
And we can't excuse it, but what do you think about that?
Oh, in India, you wouldn't believe. When we were young too, teachers or dads, they just hit us with a stick on our hands if you don't do the homework.
If you don't do your homework. Okay.
And if you don't answer their questions. But that was considered to be just as their way of, providing a discipline to the kids.
A parenting
They thought
technique.
they thought that will give the kids a discipline.
There
I
was
don't
something
know.
like that in the school I went
Yes,
to, and
yes.
it wasn't on. There was a principal, and he had a paddle. It was only
yes.
used, as far as I know, on the boys who misbehaved. But this was still in the
But still,
1960s.
they asked us to stretch your hands and
Yes, and the ruler, I think you bring up a good point about what happened in the schools all those years ago, and that may not be domestic,
Yes.
but it happened in the schools, and even I know when I was in high school,
of
if
the
the boys misbehaved, some of the bigger teachers would take them by
Yes.
this and throw them up against the locker.
It's still your
Yes.
close environment.
It
Home and
is.
school, it's still
Yes.
that familial environment.
It is.
And now in high school,
Yes.
that's not allowed, like
No.
no physical,
Punishment.
punishment is allowed.
Which
I
is
wanna-
good.
Although people always quit spanking when the kids are taller than they are. You know what I mean? It's easy to pick on a 4-year-old.
The problem is, but then the argument comes when they stop that strict discipline, is that when they're not going the right way? Is that
Yeah.
when, kids aren't going the right way too, so.
I think we should mention, I'm afraid we're going to run out of time, that we have, a lot has changed in the past 30 years or so. We have shelters for battered women, we have
We do.
supposedly child protection systems, we have elder abuse prevention systems, and
And we have education in the
but
schools as
the
well.
problem is, although certainly the government programs are so underfunded, there's been
That's
recent
right.
attention to this child who was clearly beaten black and blue by his parents regularly.
Yes.
Reported 15 times and
Yes,
really
that's
almost
right,
never
when that little one
investigated.
died.
So, we really need more government resources
We
to go to
do.
these things. But I think also we need to talk to each other and to our neighbors about
Yes.
it. And I also
And
want to say,
speak
I
up.
hope we'll have a moment at the end of the program to put up some resources too. If anybody's watching this show and wants to know where to get help,
And I think
we
that
can put some websites up for
Yes,
that.
and I think that we will be doing that, to put some websites up for you all. We've had a great session. It's gone fast, hasn't it? Talking about an awful topic, but one that needs to be discussed. So thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it. And thank you for joining It's a Woman's World. See you next time.